Good afternoon and welcome to the PACE CSGI International Webinar entitled Striking the Balance, Technology Approaches to Supporting Risk Management. I am Audrey Godfrey, Vice President of Business Development and Compliance Officer for PACE, and will be moderating today. As we get ready to begin, there are just a few housekeeping items I'd like to inform you of. Number one, this webinar is being recorded. Secondly, all lines are muted to avoid background noise. And lastly, we'll be taking questions throughout today's presentation, so please feel free to type any into the chat box located in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. We'll attempt to answer as many questions today as we go through the presentation, and we'll respond immediately. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Brandon Saylor serves as Director of Business Solutions with CSG International's Interactive Messaging Division, with more than 20 years' experience in the area of multi-channel customer experience transformation. And Brandon brings significant experience in assisting clients to successfully deploy complex interaction solutions from strategy development through implementation. His career in the call center industry includes over 15 years of business management and sales roles at AT&T Global Business Services, and now an exciting role for the past 3 years with CSG International, focusing on delivering multi-channel interactive messaging and hosting contact center services in various business verticals. Rick Danos serves as Director of Product Management for CSGI International Interactive Messaging Group, a business unit specializing in automated and interactive customer communication via voice, SMS, email, and web services. He has been with CSGIM since 2011 and has previously led the North and South American Professional Services Division for deploying product-based billing support system, software, fraud systems, and OSS integration software products. With over 20 years of experience working with large-scale telecommunications providers and .com companies across the ordering, billing, revenue assuring, and provisioning spaces, Rick has become one of the leading subject matter experts in the country. Over to you, Brandon.
Great. Thanks, Audrey. Appreciate everybody taking time out of their busy day today to join us in the webinar. During the next hour, as Audrey mentioned, we'll take questions at the end, but please feel free to type them as you think about them in the chat box. And in today's session, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about utilizing technology and best practices in support of risk mitigation. We're also going to spend some time really setting the stage and talking about the future of business and customer engagement, what's changed, what are some of the trends, and how is mobility changing things. We're also going to talk about striking the balance due to some of the changes within the TCPA and some of the risks that brought forward. And because of those risks, we'll also spend a little bit of time today talking about a number of specific use cases and technology solutions that we at CSG have been able to successfully deploy for some of our customers. But first, what I wanted to do is give a little bit of a background for those of you who might not be as familiar with CSG. So CSG International, we are a publicly traded company with revenues a little over $750 million a year. We are traded on the NASDAQ, and specifically we're listed as a global provider of revenue and customer management solutions. Really what that means is we're in the managed services and software space that we sell to the top 200 telecommunication carriers around the world, as well as a number of additional verticals such as financial services, healthcare, utilities, etc. We have about 500 customers worldwide, with our largest customers being here in the U.S., and specifically those are some of the cable customers many of you know and love, Comcast, Time Warner, Charter, etc. Because of that work that we do in the telecommunications space, everything that we build is built to scale with high levels of reliability and redundancy. And to give you an example of that scale, currently CSG, we touch over half the U.S. households on a monthly basis. We're doing over 167 million transactions a day on behalf of our customers, or over 7 billion a month. So again, a lot of high volume types of processes that we do in the background. So we're supporting over 50 million cable and satellite customers on our billing platform and our interaction platforms today. And then our group that Rick and I are representing, our interactive messaging group, we're sending out over 300 million interactive voice, fax, email, and text messages on an annual basis on behalf of our clients. We also have an output division, so we have our own printing facilities, which do black and white and multicolor, and because of the high volume that we do in that space, we're actually a top 10 U.S. Postal Service first-class mailer, sending out over 65 million pieces a month on behalf of our customers. And last but not least, again, that core system that we have over 40,000 customer service reps that are logging into our system on a daily basis to help really take care of the life cycle of their customers. So whether that's in acquisition and order entry through general life cycle questions as well as collection calling, our systems are really helping to power a lot of communication for our customers. As I had mentioned earlier, we are global in nature, so we have 32 facilities around the world, and again, we continue to expand that footprint around the world with a number of our services. And specifically then on the interactive messaging side, what you'll hear us talk about today is the fact that we run a multi-channel platform. It is a cloud-based hosted platform. I like to say we were cloud before cloud was cool, so for over 25 years we've been providing multi-channel solutions, which would include all of the different channels that you know and love to reach out to your customers. So inbound and outbound voice, SMS, standard text messaging, as well as free to end user. I mentioned print. We also work in the web, email, and fax space. And yes, believe it or not, people still fax today. So with all of those different channels, really what we're going to focus on today is talking through how to use those channels in a world that is facing ever more changes. I'd like to start the seminar by stating the obvious. The world has changed. And this change continues to drive customer requirements, which in turn drives how companies can compete in today's economy. The change we will focus on today is how technology is changing how consumers want to receive information, both for better and for worse. It's extremely hard to believe, but the first generation iPhone was launched on June 29, 2007. Yep, 2007. So in less than 10 years, mobility has changed the way we run our lives, run our businesses, and in today's economy, how we communicate with our customers. At CSG, we've seen this as the creation of the empowered customer. In this new model, access to real-time information across multiple channels is the key to successful engagement. It's all about delivering a relevant message in a channel's preferred channel, customer's preferred channel. These are the new table stakes. And specifically, let's go ahead and dive deeper and show you why we feel that this is the way that it is. So if we look at the future of business, these are some statistics. Forbes creates an annual report on trends that they see. And a few of the ones that I've always found to be the most interesting, over 40% of companies that were in the top Fortune 500 in 2000 weren't there in 2010. Now, there are multiple reasons for that, but quite a bit of that has to do with the being able to adapt to this changing environment very, very quickly. Another statistic, by the end of 2014, there were actually more mobile connected devices than there were people on Earth. And utilizing those devices, a typical mobile user checks their phone over 150 times a day. I know I actually bend that curve. I use mine more. But if you think about how many times you pull the phone out of your pocket and you look at it, the average U.S. adult is spending about 141 minutes a day using some type of a mobile device. And looking at another one here, there's over 1.5 billion smartphone users, but there's 5 billion mobile users worldwide. And again, I think that's an important one to point out, especially for those of you who have a global footprint as well. Here in the U.S., we really are very smartphone-centric, but that's not necessarily the case all around the world. So having strategies for how to reach customers utilizing smartphones as well as traditional cellular phones is also extremely important. Tablet growth is actually outpacing smartphones by threefold. And the one that's really scary is that 90% of all internet traffic is expected to be video by 2017. So, specifically the folks at Forbes, I thought this was interesting. All of these forces are leading to an unprecedented amount of change in the way we interact with our customers, employees, and the way we manage our resources. But let's continue to dive a little bit deeper and talk about customer experience. So we know that people have mobile devices. We know the adoption of these mobile devices is driving different types of experience and different types of demand sets from customers. So we also need to look at the flip side of this, which is what are some of those key differentiators as we move forward in this environment. 86% of buyers say that they will actually pay more for a better customer experience, and that by 2020, customer experience actually overtakes price and product as the key brand differentiator. A customer is 4 times more likely to buy from a competitor if the problem is service-related versus strictly price. And then 70% of buying experiences are based on how the customer feels they are being treated. This is really powerful, and this is going to be a huge change to a number of companies that have always focused on what their differentiators are, and in some instances, people think that they're competing based on price or based off of functionality. And what we're seeing here is that customers are saying, that's all very important, but the overall customer experience, how you treat me as a person, how you are going to service me after I've become a customer of yours, is equally important going forward. So it becomes extremely critical to know your customer. Again, this all sounds so self-evident, but if you go back and you look at how you utilize customer management systems today in your CRM system, are you truly capturing, besides capturing consent, which we're going to talk about, but are you capturing preference and preference management and incorporating that into how you're messaging your clients? Because there are different types of messages that get sent out, and different people are going to prioritize those messages differently, and they're also going to want to view those in different ways, whether it's Susan, who prefers email and SMS, versus Chuck, who definitely wants to have SMS for some things but voice for others, or Walter, who basically says, I always want you to call me. And knowing your customer and knowing their channel preference, again, it's extremely important, because those are those things that lead to the best overall customer engagement and best customer experience. And as we saw before, that customer experience is going to help choose those customers or those companies that will be successful going forward. If you look at it a different way, and I know this is a busy chart, but some of this appears to be self-evident, but when you see it all put together this way, it's extremely interesting to look at the fact that you can break down by generational divide what types of channels most people prefer to use. And again, it's important to understand who your demographic segment are, and again, what is the best way to approach those folks to, again, produce and provide the best overall customer experience. So whether it's the older generation, which still prefers face-to-face communication and an occasional phone call, to the boomers that, again, are used to doing things face-to-face and by phone, and all of a sudden it starts to shift between Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z. But the Gen Xers, all of a sudden you start to see this movement towards self-service. The send me the email, let me read it at my leisure, send me a text message. I want instant referrals to know that my transaction has been completed. That only continues to bend the curve with Gen Y, because they're saying, hey, I don't even want the email now, it's text messaging, it's social media. And then the millennials are just a completely breed that are going to, again, change these models and throw them on their head. They're demanding FaceTime. They want chat. They want self-service. They don't want to go live to a brick-and-mortar location. Again, they expect to be able to receive information the way they want to consume it. So understanding these trends and how these trends are changing as technology becomes available is also very, very key to creating that successful experience. So let's talk about that technology specifically then. And when you look at the cell phone owners, under 50 rarely turn their phones off. Again, some of this seems self-evident, and I'm sure many of you on the phone are thinking, yeah, I really don't ever turn my phone off. Guess what? You're not alone. The bulk of folks under 50 rarely or never turn it off. And specifically then, if you break this down further and you look at smartphone owners, as it is shown here on the right-hand side, 94% of smartphone owners rarely or never turn off their phones. Or excuse me, but they carry their phones. 82% never or rarely turn it off. You compare that to just regular cell phone users, again, the numbers are extremely high. What does that say? We are a group of folks who are addicted to our phones. We don't leave home without them. And understanding that and understanding how useful that is allows you to think about what's the most effective way to reach these customers. So let's look at this one additional way. 90% of text messages are read within the first 3 minutes. You compare that to email, which is still in most instances considered to be one of the most highly trusted ways of communicating with customers. There's over 60 billion emails sent daily, but 97% of those emails are spam. So how do you break through the noise? If you're relying purely on sending emails to reach your customers, you have a whole lot of fight to get through that inbox to make sure that your message is being delivered and being received. Another way of looking at this is that with more options, the adoption of mobility and devices is increasing. So the average last year was that the average is that hey, Mondre, I've actually lost my connection. I don't know if you're still on.
I am still on.
I have you drive for now, so I've got the deck here.
Okay.
I'll see if I can.
Tell me next slide, please.
Yep. So just sticking with this slide, 2.9 devices per person today. These are smartphones. These are tablets. Now they're going to be smart watches. With the Internet of Things, we're going to see a whole realm of different types of devices that are going to pop up, and that's going to continue to drive that need for real-time knowledge. And this last box then drives that home. So we're already crested 3.3 billion Google searches daily. So people are looking for information. They're utilizing their mobile devices to get that in real time. And all of that then is driving user behavior and changing the way that we have to provide information for our customers. If you go ahead and jump to the next one, Mondre. And actually, I'll have you jump one more time as well, so that we're on slide 17. So with all these advances in technology and seeing that so many people always carry a mobile device, it would seem that this is the best time to be alive in marketing to consumers. If you think about it, the three things you always carry when you leave the house are your wallet, your keys, and your cell phone. Think about your personal life. As we just saw, people respond to SMS in a near real-time fashion. We've been conditioned. We can't help it. The device dings, we have to look. Again, perfect way to reach your customers, right? Well, sort of. Now you enter the FCC and changes to the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. All of a sudden, the best tool ever invented to reach our customer has very strict requirements on how and when we can use this channel for either voice or SMS. And those that ignore these requirements do so at significant risk for federal, state, and worst of all, potential class action lawsuits just for trying to provide information customers are demanding. PACE has done a fantastic job of providing many webinars on the topic of TCPA. As a matter of fact, at the most recent Washington Leaders Summit this past October, they explored all the many changes to the declaratory ruling from every angle. So I'm not going to go into this very deeply, except for to say that there are a few key areas that we need to keep in mind. If you'll move to the next slide. So specifically, these were the things that were outlined in the declaratory ruling. Specifically then, the ones I'm going to talk about today are the first one, which is the definition of an auto dialer and the clarification that was granted. And yes, I did say clarification with the Dr. Evil quotation marks because this one was clearly evil by the FCC. With their clarification, they stated that almost any device that can make automated calls can be considered an ATDS. And if not today, then even if it has the potential capacity to be modified, then it's still an ATDS. Again, we're not going to go deeply into this, but I did want to point out to all those on the call today to just be aware. So unless you have rotary phones sitting on all of your agent desks, there is a considerable risk that's still out there on how your information is going, or how your telephone system is going to be classified. But the one we do want to spend a little bit more time talking about today is the second one, which was the reassigned wireless numbers. You know, this is another sticky one. And as you'll see in the next series of slides, consumers are making the shift from landlines to cell phones with growing speed, as well as constantly changing many pieces of information. The FCC has made it clear that the liability is on you to know when your customers change their phone numbers. But fear not, Rick is going to talk about this in a little bit later, and he's going to talk about some solutions on how to combat this. So during this and even our next webinar, we're going to dive into a few more of the recent TCPA changes, and then specifically how to use a combination of technology and the best practices to help mitigate these risks. So Madri, if you'll advance to 19 and then just on to 20. So let's talk about this market challenge. So specifically what we see here is the fact that there is a dramatic change, and this change is increasing very, very quickly on the number of households that have cut the cord, so to speak, and are moving from having a landline phone to a wireline phone. These statistics are actually recorded and reported on an annual basis by the Center for Disease Control in a national health interview survey that they post on their site on an annual basis. This is the most recent survey that we were able to find, which is only good through 2013. But what you'll see is that we're cresting right around 45%. And again, this number, I'm sure, in the last year or so, is getting closer and closer to 50+% of folks that have cut that cord and have made that change to wireless only. So if you're thinking, well, geez, I'm going to be really careful on who I call, I'm just not going to call cell phones. Well, there's half your potential customers you're not going to be able to reach right off the bat. So, and what we're going to focus on in the next series of webinars is talking about really the importance of reaching people on a mobile device and what the effectiveness of those campaigns look like. But I want to throw one more at you. So, Madri, if you can move to 21. When you think about that reassignment of phone numbers, here are some other interesting facts. So every year, consumers change at least one piece of contact information on themselves. So whether that's name, address, phone number, a wireless number, an email address, etc. 75 million consumers are changing their phone carrier on an annual basis. 45 million consumers actually change their phone number. Over 40 million consumer households relocate. And 2.1 people legally change their name, and this could be due to marriage, divorce, personal reasons, vanity reasons, all sorts of things. But when you think of that amount of change and you think about how old some of your customer records and databases might be, it makes you realize that you have to really have a very distinct strategy on how you're going to keep up with this amount of change so that you are ensuring, whether you have consent or not, that you actually are reaching who you think you're trying to reach. If you'll move to 22. So customer engagement and loyalty has become complex. Again, with the changes to the TCPA, class action lawsuits are absolutely a reality and in the headlines almost on a daily basis. And really what we'll say here is that there's no magic wand. There's not a single best practice or a single piece of technology that you can buy that will solve all of these problems. But there is a series of best practices and technologies that you can use that will help to mitigate these risks, and those are the things that we're going to talk about today. So if you'll advance to number 23, at CSG we've come up with the acronym of COST, and we look at this as how we help our customers control their cost, and COST being consent, ownership, stewardship, and traceability. So making sure you have a regimented program to document proof of prior express consent or prior express written consent and understanding when you need which level of consent. Again, ownership, we're going to talk quite a bit about this. Again, understanding you know who you're trying to contact, whether you're calling them, texting them, or using another channel. And then from a stewardship perspective, having this from an ongoing basis. This isn't something that you can just do once and you're compliant. This has to be a continuous almost like continuous improvement. It's a continuous process that you have to go through because, again, what we saw just a moment ago is that people are making these changes on a daily basis, and those changes, need to be captured and cared for. And then lastability, the technologies and best practices around traceability. Do you have a way to demonstrate that you have consent? Do you have a way to demonstrate that you have the right processes in place in case a class action lawsuit is threatened, or the FCC or CFPB or any of those other agencies come knocking? Let's go ahead and go to number 24, please. So again, looking at cost a different way, you'll start to see that we can, and Madri, you can go ahead and build this out. We look at technology approaches, again, knowing that there's not a single technology out there, but we look at an approach that says, do you have the right types of technology in place as well as your best practices and compliance strategies, and are you using all of those things together to create that overall compliant picture? So again, under consent, are you maintaining an accurate consent database? Are you potentially looking, if you're going to go through that expense, are you also looking at adding preference management in there to determine those preferred channels? Because we talked about that earlier, how important that is from an engagement perspective to overall customer satisfaction. Looking at language indicators are another great spot. Adding those into the consent database and the preference database, having all of that information together, and then utilizing the correct business rules to use that collectively to determine the best way to reach your clients. Followed very closely by ownership. So again, ownership and stewardship kind of go very closely together, but again, are you maintaining an accurate customer database? You know who your clients are, and are you able to utilize some of the different technologies that are out there for data assurance services? And scrubbing those lists for not only internal do not call lists or federal or state do not call lists, but again, also using other third-party services such as the daily disconnect list, ported numbers, are they voice over IP numbers? All of these different types of things can be used as a combined strategy to make sure that you know who you think you are able to verify that your customers are who you think they are. So if you do have consent, you can actually reach out to them. And then that last piece, again, from a technology perspective, is traceability. It's extremely important to make sure you're storing that customer consent because the onus is on you at the end of the day to prove that you have consent. So whether that's a written form that you're storing, whether it's a recorded voice, you're saving text messages that are sent, you're looking at saved web forms, all of these things, you need to have that process in place that makes sure you have that and can report back to it. And then in this last declaratory ruling, how important it is to also have that process for opt-outs and revocation of consent, and all of that as a holistic solution so that, again, if you are making some type of an outbound call or a text message, that you're very easily giving your customers a way to revoke that consent if they so choose to do so. And then we'll look at one more, 25. So taking all of that together holistically, what we've been doing at CSG is, again, taking a look at saying, what's our role in this and how can we help our customers? So what we've tried to do is look at how do we build different business rules and how do we take our experience in the marketplace with integrating multiple pieces and parts to create holistic solutions. So we try and take some of that burden off of our clients to say, why don't you focus on your core competencies? We can work with you. We understand the rules. We understand how to apply these different technologies and work with you to, again, add in multiple types of services to help you gain consent, help you with preference management and utilizing preference management in rules to determine, again, what channel to use and how to successfully engage those customers by their different channels. And then just as equally important, making sure you have the right opt-out capability and that you're able to capture all those. And again, all of that comes back to a collective rules engine that can be managed to really help automate this process so that it doesn't become extremely manual or dependent on one or a few people at your business to make sure that you're doing something right, but that it's repeatable and that you can prove it's repeatable. So all of those things taken together, it is definitely a combination of best practice and technology. And now specifically, I'd like to go ahead and turn this over to Rick, who's going to talk through, again, some of our specific solutions that we've been using to help our customers.
Thanks, Brandon. So the CSG is a variety of ways that we can assist our clients in interacting with their customers, and that includes, as Brandon talked about, voice calls, IVR solutions, SMS, and other types of activities. But as he's highlighted, that the area of automated outbound communications is really one that's becoming more fraught with regulatory guidelines, and it's one that you as companies need to be monitoring and managing closer and closer. So to that end, CSG offers a number of solutions to help our clients manage their compliance risk when they're engaging in some of these communications. So I've listed a couple of them here in this table, but just looking down the left-hand side, at a high level, these range from modules to help you capture and gain express consent from your customers, as well as alternate channel services that you can use to be communicating with your customers, like email, and onto our data assurance services that help to assist that the customer that you think that you're trying to reach out to actually is the customer that you're reaching. And then finally, listed here on the bottom, Disclosure Portal. This is an upcoming solution that we'll be releasing soon, and this is really aimed at ensuring that your call center agents, if they have a need to recite lengthy disclosure messages, can go ahead and remain compliant in that particular activity. But what I'd like to do here on the next couple slides is talk specifically about some of the consent and assurance solutions that we have. So for any organization that's involved in messaging its clients, a best practice really is to make sure that you establish your own internal compliance policy, and that needs to include written procedures documenting exactly what you're doing to ensure compliance. And the reason why I point this out is that in the event that your organization does receive a complaint, you want to be able to talk very easily as to what compliance controls you have in place in order to protect the communications that you're doing. So some of these controls are going to be areas that you manage as a company, like employee training. For the other areas, what I hope you'll see as I talk through some of these capture and scrubbing services that we have, is that you can utilize these services and incorporate them as part of your company's documented compliance policy. Ultimately, obviously, the goal here is to allow you to be able to assert that you're taking every reasonable action you can in order to remain compliant. So there are many ways that CSG can capture consent. We capture consent for our end clients through texting, through web pages, but one that I call out that I think is often overlooked, even though it's one of the more direct ways to capture consent, is call recording. Call recording creates verifiable proof that a customer provided their consent to receive a specific communication, and there's really nothing more compelling than to be able to present that consent in the customer's own voice. But our clients as well use recordings for other types of consent, such as validating authorizations for bank payments. And as I talk through some of these solutions, I'd like to encourage you to think a little bit outside of TCPA as well. Well, there's no doubt that TCPA absolutely has the most press coverage right now, and it's absolutely an area of significant liability. It's likely not your only area of exposure as a company, and so some of these concerns apply equally well to any type of regulatory compliance that you have to deal with. So, dealing with the segment of your customer base that has not given you express consent is undoubtedly one of the more challenging things that you're going to have to try to tackle as a company. And CSG provides a couple different options to assist with this. One option to try to gain consent from those customers that haven't provided it to you up front is to look at IVR solutions that can proactively prompt the customer for consent while that customer is reaching into you. For example, as a part of an IVR flow, we can go ahead and perform a real-time lookup against the customer record and can offer to have the customer automatically update their contact detail if we see that the inbound number that the customer is calling in on doesn't match the number that's on file right now. Or alternatively, we can look up to see whether or not they provided consent to receive some automated communications, and if not, play a prompt to the customer to educate them on some of the benefits of giving that consent and then ask them for that consent. The key point here is that you should be taking advantage of every customer touch point that you have. Another option that we have to reach customers that haven't already provided consent would be to create some type of a specialized campaign using a less regulated channel like email. And there are a number of beneficial things you could do in terms of trying to construct an outbound campaign using email, including asking customers to provide their consent, or even simply asking customers to verify their current contact information. And then finally, I just point out here that even if you do end up capturing consent from the customer, say via web form, you can still end up shooting yourself in the foot if you collect the consent from the customer, but that subscriber ends up fat-fingering in their telephone number. The unfortunate reality here is that the FCC is aware of this, and they've been extremely clear that this is entirely your issue if it happens as a company, even though it was the subscriber that provided you the incorrect information in the first place. So it's something you as a company have to be managing and taking control of. So one of the best practices to avoiding this is to implement a double opt-in flow, and that's to provide, make sure that you verify that you actually have the correct telephone number that the subscriber has provided to you. This is commonly seen, for example, when a customer signs up to receive text on a web page. What we'd do to complete that double opt-in would be to immediately text that phone number back and ask the consumer to verify that their consent is actually that request is valid. So this is a double benefit to you. You not only gain the opt-in, but you also get the assurance that the phone number that you received is valid. So talk a little bit about texting here, and texting is very hot right now as a customer communication channel, and for a lot of good reasons. It's effectively ubiquitous across all mobile phones. You don't need to rely on ensure that your customer has gone and downloaded a specialized app. It is, as Brandon's pointed out, it's a channel of immediacy. So, and it also has a very high response rate. And finally, it's minimally intrusive. And when you combine the immediacy of it, and it's almost as preemptive a channel as a telephone voice call is, it's far less intrusive than a phone conversation would be. So these things combined make it to be a real sweet spot in terms of trying to contact consumers. And what I wanted to do here was just break out a couple of the biggest users that we're seeing here at CSG in terms of text messaging. So appointment confirmations is definitely a large one here, and this is a great use case for SMS because you as a company have a need to receive an immediate reply from your subscriber. Dual-factor authentication is another very growing one right now, and dual-factor authentication has really become a security best practice to prevent customers from losing control of their online accounts. And then finally, real-time notification programs. So, for example, delivery notification programs are very popular right now as well, or for this message. And it allows our clients to keep that communication channel open and engage with their consumer on an ongoing basis. The one item that I'd point out here is that any time where you do plan to keep that communication channel open, you always want to make sure that you utilize that double opt-in to confirm that the information that you have and that contact information truly is the correct information. So if you take a look at and think about the life cycle of how you are managing outreach to your customer, I'll spend a little bit of time covering the first block here in this arrow, which is consent. Consent really answers the question of, am I allowed to contact the customer? But fundamentally, the only thing you can do after you receive that consent is record a piece of contact information. The next two blocks cover what I refer to as assurance. And assurance gives you greater insight as to actually what's really behind that piece of contact information that you recorded. And this is important because, as Brandon outlined, the reality is people's contact information changes. It changes quite frequently. Phone numbers are disconnected and reassigned. People move. So no matter how accurate and assured you can be up front that you've captured the right contact information, the reality is that it ages. So data insurance, the data assurance services that we provide include some very specific queries to help assist in some of these types of changes that happen naturally over time. The first one is a phone type query. This is a relatively simple query that simply provides information on whether the telephone number that you have and that you're planning on dial is wireline or wireless. And the more sophisticated one is the ownership query, and this provides a service to go ahead and match up the telephone number along with the customer name and give you some insight as to whether this particular phone number really is tied to a consumer. I should point out that all these queries can be performed in real time, which is very convenient for a mass outbound notification campaign you might run. Number of benefits, I think the risk mitigation and compliance management benefits of the data assurance solutions are pretty straightforward. But the one that a lot of people don't think about is the fact that it also has a result of increasing your contact efficiency. You're basically reducing the number of calls that you're making out to invalid numbers. So what you're doing with some of these assurance services is you're making the most of every outbound call. And while that's absolutely important in whatever type of communication that you send out, it's even more critical if you've got an agent involved in there making an outbound call. Talk pretty quickly to the two types of data assurance that I mentioned up front. The first one, the phone type, is what we refer to as destination query. And this, as I mentioned, gives a disposition as to whether the phone number is mobile or landline. The one item I'd like to just point out here is that the systems that we use are the same systems that a carrier would use for call signaling and routing. So what that means to you as a company is that you can be assured that the information that you're getting when we do a lookup against one of these queries is always up to date with the latest portability information. And we have a number of customers that are using this for some interesting different aspects, and we'd be happy to talk through with you some ways that you can differentiate this. But one way that customers use this service is, for example, actually verifying that if the consumer's provided a mobile number, that it truly is a mobile number. The phone ownership match service is the more in-depth examination of a phone number, and this is a service that's provided by our partner, Neustar. And the service returns a series of information about a phone number, but one of the most important things that it returns is a confidence score that determines the level to which the phone number and customer name that you've provided are actually related. Neustar makes this determination using a variety of different authoritative telecommunications databases that they have access to, as well as proprietary resources. And these Neustar services were actually mentioned and called out specifically by the FCC in their latest declaratory ruling in reference to services that companies can use to gain insight into learning about reassigned numbers. I'll go a little bit into some of the detail of what goes into and comes out of the phone ownership match service. The minimal set of inputs that you'd use to provide this would be the customer name and the telephone number, but you can also provide other inputs such as supplemental phone numbers or street address information or email address. And the output, you can end up gaining quite a bit of an output from this. The most important is what I've described as the rating score, and that shows the confidence that those two items are related. But we can also get intel back in regard to whether the address or the phone number is registered as a business or a residential line. We can get standardized postal address return and a variety of other information. The results that you can get out of this in the service is extremely powerful, but I would just encourage you to not get so lost in the details of what is returned here, because CSG's developed a pre-integrated interface into some of these services, and what we're able to do is we're able to distill these results down into actionable results, because that's what really matters here in this particular case. And this slide here shows some of the ways that we distill those down, and we present them back in a way that you can actually make actionable decisions off the results that you get back. So basically we would break them down into a traditional green, yellow, red type determination, and green would mean that we can determine and we can assert that the phone number and the name are definitely linked, and we can determine that because those two pieces of information are tied together and are represented in an authoritative telecommunications resource. At the other end of the spectrum, you have the reds, which are ones where you can examine a particular name and a phone number, and you can determine that, according to an authoritative source, that actual phone number is no longer assigned to that consumer. So in that type of sense, this particular type of record would be a compliance risk that's just waiting to be called. So we also can highlight information where we see conflicting information for some of these resources. And those are areas as well that, depending on what your risk tolerance is here, you probably would revert from and avert trying to call those numbers. The yellows would be ones where we simply don't have solid information here, and those are ones where you would likely differentiate those types of customers and pursue a different type of dialing campaign for them. I'm going to go ahead and just go and give you a sample illustrative flow to give a flavor for how these types of services can be used in here. And typically with a customer, we'd start with some sort of event from our client. And this might be the fact that some event has happened and the client wants to deliver a delivery notification or an appointment notification or something else. We can take that in and optionally run it through a workflow plan if there's any additional business logic that we need to do on our side. Once we have that information, we would go ahead and retrieve the preference and consent information. And so in the event, for example, that we'd receive simply a customer number from the customer, we can go ahead and retrieve and determine the preference might be SMS and retrieve the mobile number as well. And then right before we actually end up making the call, we can do a query out to some of these data assurance services. And depending on the information that we get back, we can develop a rule flow in real time to go ahead and live differentiate exactly what we're going to do with these. If we get a green back, we can go ahead and send the communication out in an automated manner. If we end up getting one of these cautionary results back, we may want to segregate those off to another pool to be worked. So we can either return that information back to you, the customer, and allow you to manually call those numbers, or we can parcel them off into an email campaign, which is a less regulated channel and may allow you to go ahead and uptick and determine that customer actually has definite consent. And then finally, in the cases where we're getting those reds back and we know it's an invalid number, we would send that information back to you such that you can remove those pieces of contact information from your own databases. Regardless of what happens, we'll be sending you the results of how all the communications flow. But the intent really is to make sure that as efficiently as possible, we're working through and getting all the automated communications out that are safe, that we can get out, while we're identifying and stopping some of those risky communications before they cascade into potentially more costly litigation or other type of service that you have. So, Brandon, with that, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Rick. Looks like we do have at least a few things queued up. Madre, I think, do you want to read the first questions?
Yeah, actually, we did have one question for you, Brandon. Is there a difference in the effectiveness of a campaign if you remove cell phones from calling or texting?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. And we're actually going to spend quite a bit of time in our next webinar, which we're targeting for the March timeframe. But just as a little teaser for everyone, we've been going through and measuring the effectiveness not only of our campaigns, but also our campaigns by channel, and then breaking that down on the voice side to look at cell phone versus landline effectiveness. So 2 examples off the top of my head. One would be sending out transactional fraud alerts. Again, it's important to try and reach people in real time in these instances, and what we're seeing is that the effective rate for live answer, and whether that's a response to a text message and or a call to a cell phone, is substantially higher than what you would get on a landline. And again, I think some of that is self-evident. A lot of folks are mobile. They're not necessarily home. So if you're trying to reach someone for a real-time notification, unless you get really, really lucky, catching them at home is not always the best. It's not the best way of doing so. We've also seen some pretty dramatic results we'll be sharing on the next one around automated collections. And again, there's a very direct line that we were able to prove that shows, when you are able to reach somebody from a live answer perspective and on their cell phones, we have a much higher tendency to be able to collect more from folks on a cell phone than we can for folks on a landline. So, yeah, the simple answer here is that, yeah, absolutely, there is a direct correlation. And that's another reason why keeping cell phones and completing or creating that compliant strategy is so important.
Thank you for that, Brandon. I do have another question. Actually, I didn't get a chance to type it in, but I can read it out for you. This one is for you, Rick. How long does it take to perform a data assurance scrub? And second part to that question is, can this be done in real time or only batch files?
So, good question. So the data assurance scrub is the querying of the number and returning it is actually a sub-second process. So it's something that happens truly in real time. The question about a real-time versus batch is a good one. It's one I didn't get into. It's definitely something that we can engage in a batch process, and it's something that we do with some of our customers who want to basically give us a slice of their CRM database and basically disposition the numbers and isolate them up and identify risky phone numbers up front. So, and I covered it sort of quickly in the slides, but there's a variety of different marketing intelligence that we have access to via some of these Neustar services that we use, and so we have a number of customers that are interested in trying to clean up their CRM database as well from a marketing perspective as well. So the answer is both, and both of them support different types of needs. Our preference, if we were going to be initiating automated outbound calls, is simply due to the fact that we can do this in real time, and you don't know when a piece of information is going to be bad because the customer's number has been ported away. That we'd recommend you doing a real-time lookup right before you actually initiate the outbound communication.
Okay, Rick, and does this mean that I can edit my customer base based on what is returned in the scrubbing?
You can do that. Yes, absolutely. You can use any of that data in order to edit it. Really, the intent behind some of it is in order to make sure that you have that assurance. The particular tool that I outlined has more to do with a phone number matching ability. What I'd suggest is that whoever sent out that information, there's other Neustar services that we have that are more geared toward completing marketing information that you have. So yes, you can take that and you can use it to update it, and I can certainly provide more details about some of those other types of Neustar services that we have access to, and we can provide.
Great. Audrey, if there aren't any other questions, I'll go ahead and start the wrap.
Okay.
So, again, really appreciate everybody's time today, and kind of going back and looking at the building blocks of everything we've talked today. And again, if you like the acronym of COST and again, understand all that goes into that, I think Rick has just done a very nice job of walking through a number of different programs, a number of different applications, and great ways of utilizing data assurance to supplement your existing programs and make sure that you can build on the fact that, consent is that overall foundation, but that's not the only thing that you need to focus on. It's also understanding ownership, doing continuous stewardship, and again, maintaining that traceability to be able to document and prove all of those types of things. So we truly appreciate everybody's time today, and as I referenced a moment ago, we do have a second part to this webinar that we will be doing in a few months. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on or continue this discussion for customer experiences in the digital world. We're going to talk and really dive deep into a number of mobility trends and then share real-world analysis of performance on mobile versus landline, which, again, for us has been extremely telling and is something that we're using to help to continue to modify and improve some of our applications for our existing customers. And then we'll also focus on a few more elements of this cost, which is some of the technologies, again, used for both stewardship and traceability. So with that, again, truly appreciate everybody's time today. And Audrey, I believe you said that this will be available on the PACE website within the next few days, correct?
Yes, actually, we will merge the recording onto the webinar itself, and I would say that by Tuesday of next week, we will have it up on the website for everyone to view and or download.
And both Rick and myself are certainly available to answer any other questions. If you guys think of something after this or after you've had an opportunity to look at the slides, be more than happy to go into any detailed questions. Please reach out to us. And again, we truly appreciate everybody's time and support today.
Absolutely.
All righty, so thank you all for attending today's webinar. And as a reminder, registration is open for the 2016 PACE National Convention and Expo being held at the Rose in Shingle Creek in Orlando, Florida on April 3rd through the 6th. And also, registration for the CECP certification is open. If interested, the 2-day live training course will take place immediately following convention on April 6th through the 7th, with the exam taking place on the morning of April 8th. Please visit www.paceassociation.com for more details. From PACE National and CSGI International, have a terrific day.